Hello, I'm Mike Kelly from Project Healing Waters Omaha, and this is the beginner fly tying class. This is a presentation of the Gold Ribbed Hares Ear. Tonight we have a special guest instructor, Al Beatty from Boise, Idaho, and he'll be the instructor for tonight's class. So Al, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mike. And welcome to everyone to BT's On the Fly. Tonight we're with Project Healing Waters Omaha, tying the Gold Ribbed Hares Ear. And as Mike mentioned a moment ago, I'm Al Beatty from Boise, Idaho. Now let's start out this evening with we'll take a look at the recipe. Gold Ribbed Hares Ear. Typically, you can tie it on just about any hook you wish. Tonight I'll be using a 2X long, and I think the one I'm using tonight is a size 10. But whatever size you want to use for yours. You can put lead weight on it if you wish. That's an optional. I'm not going to do it tonight. Thread is black or brown. Tail is a hare's mask. The rib is oval or flat, gold tinsel. And in fact, tonight you're going to see a substitute for all of that that we'll share with you. The body is hare's mask dubbing. The wing case is turkey tail fibers, and the thread is head. Now, we're going to move to the materials and point out to you what we have here. And we've got some things laying there that don't even look like materials, and that's because they're not. But first off, let me start with a really important item for us here in the Rocky Mountain West, static guard. I know you guys in Omaha, it probably is humid enough you don't need to worry about it. And over in Australia, it probably is not at all. But here, static electricity is crazy this time of year with the cold and the desert air and everything. So I'm just kind of spraying myself down right now to get rid of the static electricity so I can tie flies without having everything stick to me. Now, here's my turkey tail. I'll just set that aside. It's kind of in the way right now. Hare's mask, I'll set that aside. We're going to talk about that at length here. Hooks, we've already got some over at the vise. I'll set them aside as well. This is one of the things that I wanted to talk about. Oval gold tinsel. It's a fairly expensive product. You'll probably pay somewhere in the $10 range for about 15 yards of this stuff. Or for about the same amount of money, you can go to Joann Fabrics here in the U.S. and get Good Broad gold thread, size A. And you can see right there, the color is 9004. 650-yard spool will probably be a lifetime supply for you and your family and your whole fly club. But I'm just going to pull a chunk of this out right now, cut it off, set it over at my vise so it'll be ready there for me. And one of the things that's really cool about this is it's so inexpensive is I'm not continually trying to make it last just one more fly, which I often would do with that oval gold tinsel. That darn stuff would, well, it's expensive enough that I was always kind of careful with it. I'm not careful. I'm not careful with this. Now, you have an option on your thread, black or brown. I'm going to use brown tonight. I think it goes with a hare's ear color a lot better. Put that over at the vise, set the black aside. Wanted to talk about this stuff right here. Thread magic has not a darn thing to do with tying a gold ribbed hare's ear, but it has to do with your fingers, and your fingers are what you use to do all this tying. And if you're having trouble with your fingers snagging things, especially dubbing and some of those types of things, you'll find that this is really great for your fingers. Another product that's very great for the fingers is a product from the office. It's for sorting paper, but it makes your fingers just sticky enough to be able to do the dubbing process that we'll be doing here in a few minutes. In fact, I'll put a little bit on my hands right now. And I'll just set that aside. Now, these are some tools that we're going to talk about. I'll come back to them here in a minute. They're going to go with this hare's mask. But for right now, let's get over at the vise. And I'll let Mike Kelly, I'll let you tell me if I've got good focus. Does that look pretty focused?
Yeah, it looks good.
All right, good. Thank you. Okay, well, then I'll get rid of this focus fly and put a hook in the vise. And by the way, Mike, you've got some of these guys coming. Just so you know. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to imagine that I'm dividing this hook shank from here to here in half, making that the middle of the hook shank. Now, for those of you that are in this beginning class and that are real beginners, the shank itself starts right here. See where this bend starts right here? Well, right there where it's still straight is the back end of it. And right here where it starts to bend down and go to this part, the eye, is the other end, front end of the shank, and back end of the shank. Middle will be right here. So I'm going to start my thread right there in the middle. And the easiest way to start your thread is I want to talk about working length. If you're a beginning fly tyer, it is the kind of thing that happens to you all the time is the distance between the fingers holding the thread on the left and the barrel of the bobbin on the right keeps getting longer and longer. And in fact, let me go to a wide shot. I see fly tyers like this happening all the time. You can probably see the thread there, and it keeps getting longer and longer as they try to wrap like this because it's so long. Well, that's what this is for. Your hand is to squeeze the bobbin so it only feeds it as fast as you want it to. So now back at the vise, I'm going to go ahead and start my thread base right here in the center of the hook. 2 turns in front of the original crossover point. Now I'm just going to cross over all of that and start wrapping towards the bend of the hook. I want you to notice that I have tension with my left hand on the waist strand of thread. And I also have tension with the thread coming out of the bobbin. And by using the tension from the left and the right together, it lays those turns of thread just tight against each other. Even if I try to take and bring it clear out, it pulls it right back in. See how that tension is? If I took the tension off and started the wrap, you see how it opens up. Now you have to decide as a fly tyer whether you want close wraps, they're called touching wraps, or whether you want wraps that, excuse me, or you want wraps that are spread out. And it depends on the situation. But I'm going to pick up the pace now. And when I get right back here is a point of concern. It's the point of the hook. And if you're not very careful, that point will cut the thread just slicker in a whistle. So you're going to have to wrap around, come to the point, come around it, wrap around, come to the point, come around it, or raise your elbow so that you're wrapping at an angle. And you can wrap down into the bend of the hook without having to do this routine around the hook point because you're wrapping at that angle. Again, tension of left thread, tension of right thread, wrapped at an angle. And it just lays it right in there, as you can see. Now I'm going to wrap back to my starting point, trim off the waist thread, and grab this piece of oval gold tinsel, except both you and I know it's round sewing thread. Actually, it's for embroidery machines. And let me get that spool here again. I'll give you a close look at the labels. There we go. Gudbrand, 9004, 650 yards. All the stuff that you want to look for when you go to Joann's to get that. And again, it's a lifetime supply for you and the family and the fly club.
Al, just as a side note, that thread originally was designed for use in rod building. And size 8 is the thread size that we use to wrap guides on a rod, and that gold is normally used for trim bands.
Well, okay, good bit of information. The more I do these presentations, I've only been at this 65 years, and I run into people from all over the world with a good knowledge base. I'm running into people all the time that know stuff that I don't. And it's not that I don't know the business. It's just there's an awful lot to know. And there's a good example right there where John brought up the fact that it's used for tying or wrapping rods. It's also used for embroidery on clothes somewhere. I don't know. I don't know where it is. I don't use it for that, so it's not my concern. Anyway, I'm getting ready to tie this on, and I'm going to show you the wrong way to do it. The wrong way to do it is most people will start like this, wrap it. I want you to notice how the thread pushes that over to the other side of the hook. That's called thread torque. Thread torque does this to a lot of materials. It pushes it out of the way. Now, there's several ways around thread torque, and I'm going to show you 3 of them this evening. The first one, it's called the pinch wrap or the finger thumb tuck. And that's when you just put the material on top of the hook, bring the thread up between the pinch and the finger, come around the hook, snap down. And that captures it right there on top. If that's where you want it to be, is on top of the hook, then great. Another way to do it, to use the thread torque to your advantage, is by placing it at an angle on the near side of the hook so that thread torque repositions the material to the top of the hook. See how that rolls that right up there? But the best way is the one I'm going to want you to walk away with tonight. Tonight, the walk away is the one for placing ribs from now until you discontinue tying flies. And that is the method here. First off, your fly will always look better, and other parts of the fly will not get moved around by the rib if you tie it to the bottom of the hook. So let me show you one way to do that. You see how I'm coming in from the off side of the hook, slipping it around the thread, coming up and over, and I've captured it without having to wrap the thread at all, because that thread was already wrapped. Now what I'm going to do is pull this back and wrap to the back of the hook. What that is doing is anchoring that material to the bottom side of the hook shank. It's kind of important. Now I'll just leave that hang back there, but just so you can see it's right there along the hook shank, right along the bottom. Now we're going to get over to the materials and get the fibers out that we need. Oh, wait a minute. First, let me get rid of this waste. It's just going to get in the way. By the way, if that was really oval gold tinsel, I wouldn't be throwing all that away. I'd be finding some way to hang on to it, because at the expense it is on the per inch basis. But this is plenty cheap enough, so I don't worry about it. Anyhow, let's move over here and take a look at this hare's mask. I'll get a couple things out of my way. Now this is the hare's mask, the ears, the mask, place for the eyes, the cheeks, and you can even access an awful lot of hair on the back and the back of the ears and so forth. Well, the hair that we want has already been used somewhat for the tails of the fly, and it's right down here. It's not real long, not real short. Okay, as an example, I think you can see this hair right here is probably pretty close to 1.25 inches long, really long. On the flip side, this hair right here, I would be surprised if it's a 1/2 inch. On the other hand, just directly adjacent to it is hair that is slightly longer. And I'm going to grab some of that and just cut it out with my scissors. See how I got that out right there? I'm going to move it right over here to the vise and let you take a close look. You see all that guard hairs and all of that fuzz. Well, I'm going to take that fuzz and pull it out. That's the dubbing for a future part of the fly. We'll just set that down on the table. We'll pull some more out. And a little bit more. See how I got most of that fuzz pulled out of there now, and I'm not going to worry about any more or less than that right there. That looks pretty good. We'll make the tail. I like the tail to be about equal to half the hook shank. And so we'll just tie that in place and bind it down. And there's our tail. I want you to notice though how helter-skelter those fibers are. All over the place. Well, that can be really good. They work in the water and cause motion. On the other hand, if you're tying a fly for a contest somewhere and you want it to look nice and straight, well, here's the trick. I'll get this little device over here. Called a hair dryer. I know all of you, you're going to have to steal your wife's hair dryer just like I did. But what we're going to do is take that back over to the vise and we're going to use the warm air to straighten out that hair. So turn on the right, turn it on. Now that's a lot straighter than it was, and the curly cues are just about gone. There's a couple there. Makes it a lot cleaner looking fly. Does that make any difference? Not one iota to the fish or to anybody who's just going fishing. But if you're going to have to enter a contest, that might be kind of important. Now we're at a point where we want to put dubbing on the back of the fly. Well, you remember all that fur and stuff that I picked up a little bit ago and cut loose? Well, we could use that. But I'm going to show you something else because we're kind of just learning stuff here tonight. Let's go back over to that work area. I'll lay my scissors down so I don't end up stabbing myself with the scissors, because we're going to go on the back side here and get access to some of those really long fibers. And the things that I have here to play with are, number one, a hacksaw blade. Number two, a reciprocating saw blade. Now, those are all something you can probably get out of your workshop. Or at the very least, you go to Harbor Freight or Lowe's or Home Depot or something like that and get them at the store for a very reasonable price. On the other hand, if you want to go to the really high-end stuff, this is a rake made especially for it. Comes from the UK, made out of it's made out of ceramic. It's incredibly sharp, and it's made for raking, dubbing off of hides. In this case, it's going to be the hide of this hare's mask. So let's see how these all work. This one I'm going to set down for a minute. We'll come back to it in just a little bit. And this other one over here, all it is, if you'll notice, the teeth on that one are bigger than the teeth on that one. So it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I'm going to use the one with the bigger teeth when we get around to it, but I'll leave it set down there for right now. And let's start by scraping this hacksaw blade across the material. Okay, now let's take a look and see what we got over here at the vise. What we have is a well-blended bundle of dubbing, and it's blended as it comes off of the hide, as compared to this stuff that was cut off the hide. You're going to have to mix it up all over the place, and look at all those cut ends in there. They can cause you a little bit of trouble. I think I'll just set them aside for a minute. We'll probably end up using them. But for now, we're going to use this nice stuff that I scraped out using the hacksaw blade. Well, I could use a little bit more. Let's try the reciprocating saw blade and see how that works. Woohoo. Yeah. Maybe you want to get yourself a reciprocating saw blade. Boy, I got a good bunch there. Let's just come over here to the vise. And as you can see now, I've got a really nice bundle of dubbing right there. And I'll just put it with the dubbing that I took out with the hacksaw blade. Of course, that could be that the hacksaw blade is a used blade, and the reciprocating saw blade, it hasn't been in the saw yet. That could have something to do with it too. But anyway, that's a nice bundle of dubbing right there. So anyway, I'll set that down for a moment, and I'm going to use some dubbing wax. It's up to you whether you use wax or not. It makes zero difference in the end product. It just sometimes it's easier if you put a little bit of wax on the thread to get it all to stick until you get it twisted into place. And I want you to notice that I'm just greasing up. We're making sticky the thread with the wax. I'll set that aside. And now we'll just start taking small bundles of this, twist it into place. Notice that I'm twisting in one direction only, and that direction is clockwise if you are in a position above the hook looking down on the hook. You're going to find that as you learn to dub, people have a tendency to do, I'll do this on the next one here. Let me get this one wrapped on the hook first. People have a tendency to over apply the dubbing. And let me just wrap forward here for a minute, right into the front part of the hook. We're just going to use this for an experiment and then cut it off. Let me show you what not to do. I'll put some dubbing wax on. And the tendency for all new tires is to do this right here. They'll just grab their bundle of fur and say, okay, and they'll just start trying to twist it into place. Now, I'm kind of exaggerating the point, but the fact of the matter is I see that happen more often than not. Now I'm going to start to wrap this. I want you to notice that it's not going to look the same as what's on the back of that hook. You see that? Now we're going to want something like that when we get to the front, but there's a better way to do it. Let me unwrap all of this. And I'm just going to switch my thread around and cut it off and get rid of all that. All right, good. Now at this point, I'm going to stop for a moment and ask if there's any questions out there. And if you got them, ask them. Okay, back to the vise we go. Now, one of the things I'm going to do is to attach some material here called turkey tail. And that's going to be for the wing case. But another major mistake that people make is I want you to notice the difference in the dimension of the part with the dubbing on it and the part that only has thread on it. It's a lot skinnier. And if you tie the wing case material, the turkey tail, straight to the hook shank, it's more difficult to get a nice wing case out of it. It tries to collapse because the starting point is very narrow. So what we're going to do is put some additional dubbing here in front and then attach the wing case on top so that we have a wider base so that the wing case stays wide rather than collapsing. So let's go back over here. And we know the reciprocating saw blade works pretty good, so I think I'll just use it for a moment. Okay, there we go. And as you can see, we got a pretty good bundle right there. Let me get a little bit of dubbing wax. And we're going to build that area up. Now, another way that builds that area up, and it's an optional item, but this is also the area where you would put lead wire and wrap it for additional weight. Right in here.
Al, do you use a darker dubbing on the underneath the wing case than you do on the body?
Do I use a what kind of dubbing?
Darker color. In other words, from the hair, from the ear.
I don't know what the correct way on a hare's mask is. I've seen them both ways. Being a commercial tire, I asked the customer, what do you want?
Right.
And the truth of the matter is, the only thing, almost all of them, it's the same color, whatever how it comes off of the skin. And it's a bulkier thorax than it is an abdomen.
Okay,
So
thank you.
thanks for the question. So I can't remember, I think I put wax on there, but I'm going to do it again anyway, because I can't remember if I did it or not. And I'm just going to go ahead and twist this into place. And now I'm going to use the tackiness of the wax to kind of hold this in place. See how that's kind of holding on there before I even twist it? So the wax can actually help you apply that material. All right, now we're just going to build this up. Now, I want you to notice that I did not get close to the hook eye. That's very important. You don't want to do what's called crowding the hook eye. In fact, this area here is going to be even a little fatter than the area behind it before I put the wing case on. The reason being is I want that wing case not to collapse and become skinny. I want the wing case to be at least as wide as the front part. And see, that's just a little bit wider than the back part, which is what we call the abdomen. All right, back over at the materials area. Let's grab our turkey tail, and I'll just cut a piece of this out. And as you can see, I've got a slip of that cut out. Get back over to the device. We have options here. There are no right answers to this question, but do you tie it in by the tip or do you tie it in by the base end? Doesn't make any difference. That's up to you as a fly tyer. All I can tell you is that in some cases, tying it in by the base end, the wing case, this part, tends to split more than it does if it's tied in by the tip. That's up to you. If you're worried about materials and you don't have a lot of materials, tie one in by the base end and then take the other remaining piece and tie it in by the tip. But in any case, you don't use this stuff way out on the tip. You're going to start using it right about here. So let me tie it in place. Also, the other thing I want you to notice, this is what I call the front side. It's a nicely colored side. And this is the duller side, the back side of the feather. Back side, front side. Well, I want this side to be facing up. That means when I tie it to the hook, it has to be facing down so that when I pull it up and over, that side is the side that's showing. So we'll just get in here and tie this in place. Want to make sure that it's the same on both sides. Okay, good. And I'll just go ahead and bind that in place now. Trim off the waist. Now, before we go any further, we'll go back and see if there's any questions.
What I've what I've seen in the past with the tips of that turkey feather, I'll use that for smaller flies, and the heavier butts of the turkey feather of those barbs I would use for the bigger flies.
Absolutely, a very good option.
Now we're substituting pheasant tail for your turkey tail, or I've also seen it done with turkey wing feathers. Have you ever seen that?
I have too, and you said I'm substituting pheasant. This isn't.
We didn't have any turkey tail feathers.
John, come back this way. John,
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah. This is a.
Let me get under the mic.
Okay, that's a turkey tail feather, but yeah, I've used everything under the sun, and I tell you what, there's some synthetic materials out there that are modeled to look kind of like turkey tail that are really good. There's a kind
Okay.
of a stretchy material, I forget what it's called, nib skin or something like that, that makes a really great wing case. I mean, so
Oh,
it's kind of up to you, whatever you want to use. And especially now that we're talking about beginning fly tying, and what you're doing
Yeah.
is probably constructing patterns that you want to take to the river and catch fish. You're not trying to win a contest anywhere. So it can be any one of the above. It can even be some dyed cloth. And I've
Oh,
used
I
that.
hadn't thought about that. Yeah, cool. So
All
point
right.
is, whatever works for us.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Okay, well,
Now,
now let's
Al,
get
Al,
to,
do you tie the ribbing material all the way through the front, or do you just tie it around the abdomen?
you know what? Thank you. I flat forgot to tie the rib on.
Well, now would be a
The
perfect
rib
time
is
to do
on,
it.
but I forgot to wrap the rib. So now I get to fiddle around and fix my mistake. So how do I do this? Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. There's a thing called a hair clip. I think I got, yeah, here we go. One of these guys right here. They're not made for fly tying, but we're going to use it for that. See how I hold that forward? So now it's out of my way. And here's my rib material. Now remember, that's tied to the bottom. So the first turn now is going to be right here towards the back. And it comes from the bottom, so it won't push the tail aside. If I was starting from the side of the hook, it could push the tail over, and we don't want that. Now, the question you all are asking yourselves, did Al really forget to wrap the rib? Or was this all part of the plan? I'll never tell. By the way, there's a couple of these that I tie that they sink like a rock, and I use a fine silver lead wire. I've got some here, or maybe it's a non-lead wire because it doesn't bend quite as good as the regular lead does. And I use that for my rib. And then when I get forward to the wing case, I wrap it in real heavy, and you've weighted the fly as well. Just another way of making use of your materials and adding weight at the same time. One of the things you need to be careful of, though, if you're adding weight in this area right here, the more weight you add, the more likely the fly is to flip over in the water column. And that would then make your wing case pointing down instead of up. And that, if that's what you want, that's great. But the truth of the matter is, that's not usually what you want. There's ways around that, but that's not in tonight's program. So let me build up the thorax, and then we'll fold our wing case over. All right, I got the wax in there. We'll go back over, and now I'm going to get one of these guys out. It's a ceramic rake. Okay, and now I got all this dubbing this raked out, and I'll pick that over to the vise, and we'll just start setting it in place here on the thread. Now we want this to be a little bit heavier application than we did on the back, but we still don't want it to be too much. So let me make sure that the wax helps me scatter this all out. You see how nice and fuzzed up that stuff is where that rake, I'll pull it out here so you can see better, where that rake is raked it up. That might be a little bit much, but I can tell you right now, my fingers are not slipping very good. They're slipping too good. I've been working in the yard all day, and it really is tough on the hands. So I'm going to use some of this stuff, the Sort Quick, to kind of put a little tackiness to my fingers so it's a little easier to dub. All right, there we go. Now that's going to pull down pretty good. Now it's really important right down here at the very, let me see, maybe I can point to it off of this camera. I want you to notice right there. That spot right there where I'm pointing my scissors needs to be really tight, and it's not. So I'm going to twist it a couple of times. And now I'll fold it up so you can see up. Let me go to that camera so you can see better that it's twisted into a nice tight application. We need that to finish the fly. The rest of it can be kind of loose. We're going to pick it out anyway. Now let's go ahead and wrap this into place. And our goal is to make a bulbous application of dubbing. You don't want to do it all at once though. Let's work our way back to the wing case, work our way back forward. And I want you to notice how I kind of crisscross here in the center until I get to this last tightly twisted area. What I don't want to do is have the thread show through as I come here to the front. And let's make sure that it didn't show through. It doesn't. This is good. Now it's time to fold our wing case over. If you're having a lot of trouble with your wing cases, folding them over, here's a little trick that might help. A bodkin. Instead of just pushing this forward and trying to get it to lay just right, the doggone wing cases have a tendency to kind of slant one way or the other. Well, I'll put this up like this, bend it over, and now that gets it laying just the way I want it. Okay, that's just the way I want that wing case. I want to twist it over just a slightly amount so that it's even on both sides. Good, it is. Let's trim off the waist. Wrap a thread head. Get my whip finish tool out. The Healing Waters whip finish tool. And we're going to put the whip finish in, and I want you to notice that the whip finish always starts at the back of the head, and each subsequent turn is closer to the hook eye. It travels from the back of the head to the front of the head, not the other way around. We'll explain it to you why at some other time. But for right now, we're going to clean that out, trim the thread, take a look at the overall profile. That looks good. And now it's time to do something that it may or may not show in your instructions, but I want this to be a little looser than it is. And so I'm going to use a bodkin to kind of pick this dubbing out a little bit. And that's one way to do it. I don't want it to be too terribly loose. I don't want it to be all over the place, but I would like it to have just a little bit of motion in the water as it fills up in the water column. So there we've got it kind of picked down just a little bit. Let's go to the other side. Now, are there other tools that you could use for that? Well, yeah, there sure are. In fact, let me grab one. I've got a couple over here. This is probably the best one of the bunch, so I'll just use it. I got a buddy that's a bamboo rod maker, and he sent me a piece of a bamboo. I guess there's little waste pieces left over when you're making bamboo rods. I don't know anything about it, but that's some Velcro that I put on the end of it. That's the hook end of the Velcro. And that works pretty good for picking. See how that'll pull that stuff out? Well, that's even better than I wanted it to do, but
you could probably use a glue it to a pencil too, I would suspect.
Oh,
the-
absolutely. You can do that. And in fact, let me show you a couple of things that you can use. Here, another buddy made this one out of a dowel that he taped a whole bunch of needles to. You got to be careful with that one. You can, well, you could injure yourself a little bit. And here, another buddy made this one for me. He likes to use his wood lathe to turn handles and stuff. And he took a part of an electrical cord and shoved it in there. And that one really works good. And of course, the best one of all is the cleaning brush for a 22 rifle. So, and all you vets should understand about cleaning brushes. So enough said on that, but there is your Gold Ribbed Hares Ear. Any questions?
Another thing I've done for the Velcro is just a little strip of it on the handle of my bodkin. So it's a tool that I already have, and on the handle of it, I just flip it around and it's got that piece of Velcro on it.
Yeah. The other thing that I've done too is I take a popsicle stick and just glue a piece to the end of the popsicle stick. Any other questions? Comments?